Welcome back to Season 3 of the Dudes of the Dead podcast. If you missed Season 1 or Season 2, including our top 10s of 2021 and 2022, you can find all of our previous episodes on Apple, Spotify, Anchor, and Google. I'm Leatherface Lee.
And I'm Maniac Mike. This season, we've added an email for the show, dudesofthedead@gmail.com. Feel free to email us your thoughts on the films we discuss, and we're also asking for listener requests for Season 4. So email us a film if you'd like us to review it in Season 4, whether it's a personal favorite, a controversial film, or a hidden gem starring Nicolas Cage.
We can't wait for you to listen to Season 3, including some appearances from friends of the pod, as well as some bonus episodes. We're also on YouTube at Dudes of the Dead Podcast.
This season, we're excited to review some standouts from 2022, some older classics, and as well as some new films from 2023. We'd also greatly appreciate if you'd be willing to leave us a rating and a review. Thanks for joining us again, and
we'll see you in the aisles.
Happy New Year! So welcome to our daring and dynamic double feature of dueling douchebags, where we will discuss Dashcam and Deadstream, find out if these films dominated, divided, or disappointed. We're back for Season 3, and we'll be focusing on single reviews again this season. So we are going to break, though, for this one episode to discuss two films again, despite wanting to go back to one film.
I'll let you have one guess about whose choice that was.
Ta-da! Might have been mine.
And by the way, we are recording this, even though this is episode 2 and it'll be airing on January 15th. We are recording this on January 1st, so Happy New Year.
Yes. So we felt, because these are both live stream horror, kind of found footage, it might be appropriate to discuss them both in the same episode. So that's why we are deviating slightly from our single film formula for Season 3. And both films feature arguably annoying and grating influencers. And Sean in Deadstream actually says, "Oh, I hope people don't think I'm a douchebag." So we thought it might be funny to have like the dueling douchebag documentarians episode. So,
holy alliteration, Batman.
Yeah, it works. So full disclosure, we are going to be talking about full spoilers for both Dashcam and Deadstream. And also, I am getting over a cold, so I apologize if my voice cracks or if I sound sick.
Although some of you might find that quite sexy.
Fair enough. All right, so should we jump in with Dashcam?
Let's do that.
All right, so Dashcam got a 4.7 on Internet Movie Database and 48% critic score with a 35% audience score on Rotten Tomatoes. This was directed by Rob Savage, who's the director of Host.
Oh, okay. I actually didn't check that out. That's disappointing.
Exactly. I was going to say, I really enjoyed Host.
I like that one.
So for those who didn't see it, it's a movie that was one of the few films actually produced during the pandemic and takes place entirely on Zoom.
I think so, yeah.
And it got really good reviews, and I thought it was brilliant. I think that made my top 10 list of that year. So this is the same guy, Rob Savage.
I did not know that.
Yes, and starring a real-life YouTuber, Annie Hardy, who plays herself in the film. And her YouTube channel is Bandcar.
Yes.
Yeah, and so the idea is that she goes around and does improv rap lyrics in response to the things people are typing into the live chat. Okay, so the premise is, at the start of the pandemic, an indulgent and self-deluded live streaming improv musician abandons LA for London, steals her ex-bandmate's car, and makes the wrong decision to give a ride to an elderly woman who is not what she seems. So there's a lot we can talk about with this film. Perhaps it makes sense to start with, what did you think of Annie Hardy?
Well, so I guess full disclosure, when I'd heard about this film, and I think, did we both make the same mistake and watch? I don't know if listeners, if you're aware of this, but there are two Dashcam films that came out in the same year. And one of them is sort of a political thriller, maybe, would you call it that? And that's the one that I watched and actually quite enjoyed and thought, this isn't really a horror film.
Yeah, me too.
And I didn't realize that there was a second Dashcam film. Anyway, so I eventually got to this Dashcam film, and I found the lead so annoying that I had to turn it off partway through, and it took me a couple of weeks to get back and finish it.
Same here.
And it was a bit painful to go back knowing what I was getting into and watch it the second time for this podcast. I struggled with the film for a couple of reasons, but she was the main one. I think there were some, for me, unfortunate decisions that were made in the film. And I think other than her character, which was grating, I don't think the film knew what it wanted to be. And so I found it quite disjointed at times. It's like, okay, focus on what it is. Like, do you want to be an alien horror film? Do you want to be a found footage film? Do you want to be a horror comedy? So for me, spoilers, Deadstream was a much more successful film because I feel like from the get-go, the tone of the film knew what it wanted to be and stuck to that and held me. And this one didn't.
Yeah, this was very peculiar. So this is a live stream horror. So she is presumably on YouTube or somewhere doing her YouTube thing.
Yeah, Twitch or something. Yeah.
And you have the live chat going in the corner of the screen. But she has to be one of the most obnoxious characters I've ever encountered in a film. And that's not being hyperbolic. Like, I actually struggle to think of a character who I would hate more than this person.
Yeah, I mean, I've had more,
especially as the protagonist.
Yeah, I've had more empathy for villains in film than her.
100%. I wrote down rude, belligerent, obnoxious, grating, annoying, and so to stick the viewer with this person for the entirety of the film is really odd. Especially in a horror film, because in a horror film, the idea is that you should be sympathizing with the protagonist and rooting for them, and you are kind of scared for them. When you want the protagonist to die, that seems like a problem when they're faced with these harrowing events. That's maybe extreme, but going online and reading people's reactions to this film, like, that was people's experience. Like, they were just waiting for her to die because they want her to, like, I get having a character like her as part of an ensemble of characters.
For sure.
But as the sole person, and she was kind of a caricature.
Yes. Yeah, agreed.
Because I get that maybe you have that persona when you're doing your live stream thing, but then when it hits the fan and the horror starts happening and there's real stakes for her in her life, she's still acting like a moron. And like, I guess we should say this character is kind of your classic culture warrior, tribalistic, anti-vax, anti-mask, anti-lockdown, MAGA, anti-BLM, anti-Antifa. Like, this is your right-wing culture warrior to the extreme.
Yeah, caricature is perfect. Yeah, I mean, that's exactly what she comes off as. And that was my same reaction. It's like, I just wanted her to die in the most horrible way possible, right from the, almost from the get-go. And there was nothing terrible enough that happened to her that I could, to me, the only, I don't know if you felt the same way. I actually felt that the end credits were the only redeeming part of the film. It was, those I found kind of funny when did you watch right through to the end credits? And she was like, I don't know if it was written or she was riffing on people's names.
Granted, maybe she has some talent for being able to freestyle the way I couldn't do that. So, okay. Yeah, I agree. But then this is where the film gets interesting, because then is he kind of glorifying that character?
Right.
And I don't know what his politics are. And even to say, like, this type of character would be just as annoying on the left. Like,
for sure.
Like a culture warrior, a total tribalistic, someone who only enjoys dunking on the other side and has no nuance whatsoever. Whether it be a right-wing person or a left-wing person, it would be annoying.
Yeah. I'm going to go out on a limb and say that he leans a lot further to the other side if he's going to caricature a right wing, but I don't know that for sure.
Do you think he'd be coming from a left wing perspective?
I think so. Yeah.
But then why not kill her off in the most, like, to have her survive and then have this kind of like redeeming finale? I thought was just very bizarre. And I think on the one hand, like, yes, Hollywood is very left leaning and most films come from a left wing perspective. And I think there's room to have maybe an anti-establishment, more right-leaning film that maybe questions the pandemic. Like, that would be totally fine with me. But this seems to glorify the culture warrior. And the reason that our society is so bad is because of these types of people who only get off on just antagonizing people, and they're not actually trying to solve any problems.
Well, and as you said, whether it's on the right or the left, doesn't matter. It's like it's that dogma, that dogmatic approach where there's no nuance in what you're doing.
Like, she's just a horrible person.
Yeah.
She's just treating people like crap, and she's
from her friend to his fiance or whatever, to like everybody that she meets along the way.
Yeah.
And I think that's what part of what I meant at the beginning was, I don't feel like the film, and I'm assuming, a lot of the control would be Rob Savage, had a grip on what he wanted the tone of the film to be.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe we're missing something.
I did watch a short interview with him where he said, oh, well, we do have these people in society, so I wanted to like highlight that type of person. But I didn't get a sense that he was making any commentary. Like, I didn't get, what's your point? Like, why choose a character like this? Especially one who's real. Like, it'd be one thing to write this character, but then to use an actual real life person who I went and watched some of her stuff, and she certainly leans this direction politically.
Oh, interesting.
Like, this is not, like, she is kind of a right-wing culture warrior.
Gotcha.
So bizarre to have her as your protagonist.
Well, and that's, and I mean, we'll talk about this more, I'm sure, but that's in comparison to Deadstream, where the protagonist in that one comes off as a douchebag, but he admits it. And
he's kind of an endearing douchebag too.
He is, because there's a humanizing component to his character, like, partway through the film where he is getting into trouble. And I would argue that he starts to be a little humanized there. And he's like, I actually didn't mean anything I apologized for. And, there's some, to me, some reality. It's like, okay, I was appeasing the sponsors. And I said, to me, the fun about that film was the realism of, at least what I perceive to be the realism, is those public apologies where you go, I don't feel like that's actually probably what they're just, trying to make money.
Yeah.
So I feel, in contrast, Deadstream had a much clearer idea of what it wanted to be and what it wanted the character to be. And as you say, in the process, there were elements of his character that humanized him to the point where, even though he was a douchebag, he was a likable douchebag.
Yeah.
Right.
Whereas her, like, even the right-wing politics aside, she's just a terrible person. Like, she's mean to people. She's grating to people. Her friend steps on a needle and she's just cracking jokes about what a wuss he is.
Yeah.
But like, there's very real world consequences for this person who's apparently your friend. So it would have been another thing if she evolved over the course of the film, or maybe she dropped the crazy culture warrior shtick and became more of a human being in the second half. But she maintains that very, like, unrealistic in my mind. Like, in the face of these horrific events and supernatural happenings, you're still just making, like, own the libs jokes.
Yeah.
I think that just failed for me.
Yeah. And I agree. I think that was, I mean, I have a big note on my thing that she's so toxic as a human being. I found there wasn't anything relatable because, as you say, there didn't seem to be any growth. There was no arc for her character. It was the same. It was that same caricature from start to finish, no matter what she was facing. It was almost like she was an automaton. There was no emotion there. Like when her friend was in trouble, or her friend, dies, or things happen to her that would be pretty horrific if it happened in real life.
Yeah.
And you think, okay, there's nobody who's going to have that much, no matter who your personality is or what your personality is publicly, you're going to have moments where you succumb to emotion, whether that's fear or, whatever. So yeah, I think I agree with you. I think that's where it failed as a film for me. Like,
from the interview with him, the brief interview, I got the sense that he's just kind of fascinated by the pandemic and what it has done to society. And obviously did the host film. So I can see that perhaps he's saying that maybe the pandemic created this type of person. But then, like, is it trying to be humorous? Like, there's that one part where the car crashes and there's like a dead woman who was on her wedding night.
Yeah.
But then she throws the like anti-liberal sweater on her. Yeah. So obviously, like, you're taking what should be kind of a serious, sad moment and making it kind of a joke. So I think tonally he didn't achieve anything. But I think that was maybe one of the problems. Like, he mixed these different elements, but there was no cohesion in terms of what he was trying to achieve. And so it kind of just becomes a muddled mess.
And that's, I mean, we've discussed this before. I mean, I think that's the challenge with having, even if you're not going to label yourself as a horror comedy, like, Deadstream, there's no question what it's trying to do or what we do in the shadows. for another example, but you can have comedic elements without necessarily having to lean in that direction. It can be sort of a veneer. Whereas in this one, I just don't feel like it knew what it wanted to be. And there were those moments that just didn't fit. I mean, one of the ones that I had a good chuckle at was the Donald Trump bobblehead in the car. Like, there were those moments, but I think it detracted rather than added anything.
And I don't know about you, but this was also one of the most like jarring, unenjoyable viewing experiences I've had. Just as a film, the shaky cam was so extreme.
Yeah.
Like all the other Annie Hardy things aside, like I just could barely ever tell what was happening. The way they tried to capture the horror, I felt failed because I almost wanted to like go vomit because I felt dizzy from the way the camera was shaking around. What did you think of that?
It's funny because I just was looking at my notes and I said the shaky cam Dutch angles is so old hat. And then I put a question mark like, is this 1999 and Blair Witch? Like, this has been done so many times. And it's, in this case, it's not done well.
Yeah.
So figure out a way. The found footage genre is old, but it's been done well. Like, I'm not a fan particularly, but there are ones that have been done well. So figure out a way to do it that isn't trying to replicate something else that's your own style. I just felt that there were all these disparate elements, like the old woman when there's all this shaky cam stuff and then she comes floating down. Like, the ending was just like, what the hell is going on? Like, there's what does she call it? A sperm monster or something?
Yeah.
I just. Yeah,
even the central plot part I didn't find very cohesive or was kind of hard to follow.
Yeah.
It's a good point you make, though. Actually, this is our first found footage review, I think, that we've done.
I think maybe, yeah.
And I think I could glean from what you just said there. Like, what are your thoughts? Are you a fan of found footage, or it sounds like not really?
Not really, but I have tolerance for it if it's done well.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I made a comment in our top 10 thing of 2022. Like, it's kind of like a time travel film. Don't try to figure out, well, why would the camera, like, just ignore logic and just say, okay, this is what this purports to be. Just enjoy what it is. And I can enjoy it if it's done well. And if it has focus, and if the found footage part isn't taking me out of the film.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think of something like Rec, the original Spanish one. That was fantastic.
Yeah.
And I'm not a found footage fan, but I've watched that multiple times and I never tire of it because it's very clear on what it's trying to do. And rather than doing the shaky cam thing, it does another, trope that's sometimes overdone, which is the, dark, and then you see something and then dark, but it's done so well. It scares the pants off me every time I see the final, sequence in that film.
Yeah.
This one just doesn't do it.
And his original one, Host, I thought was very good, and I enjoyed that.
Yeah.
So I'm like you. I do find it's very easy for found footage films just to always rely on the same techniques and tropes. So, but if it's doing something unique, doing something different, and it's well done, then I think they're good. And what did you think of the device then of the live stream chat in the corner? Because I found that almost kind of distracting because either I had to read the chat and couldn't really tell what was happening on the screen, or I was watching what was happening on the screen and couldn't really follow the chat. And in this case, the chat was just as vitriolic and horrible as Annie Hardy. Like, it was just a bunch of racist, extremist political points. Like, I just didn't enjoy reading it. I just found it was a bunch of despicable people.
Yeah, I had the same experience where, although I didn't focus on it exclusively the second time through, I knew what was happening, so I kind of focused on the bottom left or wherever it was. And I mean, this could be the fact that I'm getting old, but I found it a little small. I was watching the second time on a smaller screen, so that's part of the problem. But
having a 75-inch TV helps in that regard.
Yeah, for sure. And I think in Host, it was more in your face, the chat part. Like, it was totally. It was much bigger on the screen
because they're on Zoom.
Yes,
exactly. And there was that also film, is it where the guy's trying to hunt for maybe his daughter and he's on a desktop. The whole movie takes place.
Yeah. Shoot, I can't remember. I know who you mean.
Yeah. Like, I thought that was good. Like, I think there's room to experiment with these different like online mediums and how you integrate that into film. But the particular idea of following like a chat in the corner, I just found a little bit distracting. Although I think in Deadstream they use it more effectively.
I think so too.
We could talk about that momentarily.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm kind of glad we decided to discuss 2 films for this episode because I actually don't feel like there's a ton more to say. But is there anything else for Dashcam that you wanted to bring up?
Not really. I mean, I think the Rotten Tomatoes scores were pretty deserved. I'm actually surprised the critic score was higher than the audience score.
This was on some top 10 lists, which actually surprised me.
When I watched it, when I actually completed watching it the first time, I was like, okay, I much rather would have had the other Dashcam film. Not that was a horror film, but to me, that was a much more successful film in terms of social media and social commentary. Yeah, this one just falls flat for me. I was sorry that I had to watch it a second time, but I took one for the team on that one.
Yeah, other than some of the body horror, which was maybe effective, there's a lot of blood, there's a lot of feces, there's a lot of vomit. It's a lot of like kind of gross things in this movie, which maybe had an impact. But overall, I would say avoid this film. Like, I think it's just a horrible viewing experience, really. It's jarring. Her character is horrible to tolerate. And the shaky cam part, I don't think it's a good found footage film either.
No. I don't think it has. I mean, yeah, I don't think for me it has any redeeming qualities. And I was surprised at how much hype it seemed to get in 2022 for the quality of film that it was.
Yeah, so I'd be curious to know the political leanings of Rob Savage to see, like, maybe if you're a right-wing culture warrior, you'll love this film. But
yeah.
Anyways, so we're both saying avoid.
Avoid.
Okay, so moving on to the other live streaming film from 2022, Deadstream. This is directed by Joseph and Vanessa Winter, presumably a couple, starring Joseph Winter as Sean Ruddy and Melanie Stone as Chrissy. And the synopsis is: a disgraced internet personality attempts to win back his followers by live streaming one night alone in a haunted house. But when he accidentally pisses off a vengeful spirit, his big comeback event becomes a real-time fight for his life. This one fared much better with critics, 6.5 on Internet Movie Database and 91% on Rotten Tomatoes. And this was also on your top 10 list, I believe, from 2022.
It was, yeah.
So this is another live stream horror film with influencer Sean Ruddy, who's recovering from a scandal and he apparently made some big apology video. And he's going to redeem himself by surviving for a night in a haunted house with his audience. And I love the hilarious intro montage.
Yeah, that's so good.
He does like the baby Moses challenge where he's like going down a river in a basket. And I think this is successful in kind of mocking YouTube culture. In YouTube, there's all these different challenges that they're trying to do.
Yeah.
And unlike Annie, I felt Sean was kind of endearing, lovable douchebag. And actually felt pretty authentic as a live streamer mostly.
Yeah.
Yeah. What'd you think of Sean Ruddy?
I think, as you said, I mean, this was on my top 10. It was a real pleasant surprise when I watched this. And I thought there were, although I wouldn't say it's a scary film, I thought there were some good horror tropes in there. And not being a found footage fan, I didn't expect much when my first viewing. And then I was very drawn in to his personality, his character. I do feel like, having watched quite a bit of YouTube, in the last 5-7 years, he seemed very realistic to me, very like somebody that, I could see this personality.
He kind of reminded me of one of those guys from Jackass. Like, he's kind of like funny and lovable, but kind of endearing. Yeah. Although kind of ridiculous also.
And even though, some of what he's doing is really wrong. But like I said earlier, I mean, I think his humanity comes through at certain points.
Totally. He seems like deep down he's trying to be a good person.
He's trying. I mean, he's obviously in it for the money, and he's, he leans that way and he caves into things that he thinks are going to get him more views or, better monetization or whatever. And I love, one of the things that really hit home for me was, I forget the name of the product, but when he drinks the product in the house. And it's that whole product placement thing is so good and it's so bang on. Like, so those are the things that I really enjoyed. Like, I felt he has a really clear idea, not only of what he's sending up, but what he wanted the film to be. Yeah. And that works, right?
Like, there's so many times where I laughed out loud during this movie just from the little one-liners. And he plays it pretty straight, but then what he's saying is just so funny. A bit of a love letter, I think, to horror films. Like, there was lots of references, I think, to The Ring, to The Exorcist, to Halloween. And I think you'll probably agree, very evocative of Evil Dead.
Oh, yeah.
In terms of the style of the horror, where it's kind of like over the top, almost hilarious, but kind of grotesque. And
that's a great point. Yeah. 100%. Yeah.
Like to me, it felt like Evil Dead, like just the ridiculous makeup and the screaming, like the nature of the evil and the demons that he's encountering, which I think is nice because there's not a whole lot of films, I don't think, that have like successfully kind of, he was replicating that Evil Dead style, but in a very like refreshing way.
Yeah, I agree.
And in kind of exploring a new medium. And unlike Dashcam, I felt the live chat in this case was functional. So his audience points out like, oh, did you see like the ghost in the camera? And then he has to go back and investigate. Or he does like the little poll for his, like, should we keep Chrissy around?
Yeah.
So unlike just a bunch of vitriolic, hateful spewage that we get in Dashcam, I felt like the chat in Deadstream kind of forwards the plot, and he's interacting with it in a way that makes it more engaging and interesting.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I mean, even like so there are some negative comments in the chat, but they're not vitriolic is a good word. Like, I think he calls it the Wrath of Sean, and somebody says Wrath of Yawn. Like those are funny.
They're funny.
Yeah, they're funny little quips that the show up in the chat. And to me, that again, coming back to that idea of, does it add to the film or does it detract? Does it take me out of the experience? And in this case, I would say it adds to it. It engages me in the experience.
Yeah, this film's so satirical, but I love we often have this device in horror films when they have some expert who knows the lore of the monster. Totally. So in this case, there's some like 12-year-old kid who's like, hey, Sean, like, here's this thing. Or like the old granny who's like very slowly and painstakingly trying to like explain how he can like get out of this mess. So all those things I thought were clever uses of the live chat that made it fun. And I think you could almost watch the film twice, because you could rewatch the film a second time and just focus maybe on the chat. And I think the chat was clever in this case and funny. So I would actually maybe want to do that. Whereas Dashcam, I would not.
I mean, and funny you should say that, because this was a late addition to my top 10 list of 2022. And I think I watched it maybe at the very end of November, early December. So within the last 5 weeks, I've watched this twice. Had no issue watching it the second time. And I could see myself coming back to this if I was in the mood and think, oh, I'd like to watch kind of a horror comedy. And I'm very much interested in social commentary and the critique of what we're doing as a society, particularly online culture, but not always in a serious way.
Yeah.
And so I really appreciate you peel back the layers, and there's some serious commentary here. It's just done in a comedic, palatable way.
Yeah.
Right.
And I like that he's poking fun at kind of online streamer culture, but also poking fun at like horror movie tropes and conventions. So you can kind of appreciate it. Even if you're not a horror fan, maybe you wouldn't pick up on some of the horror things, but you get the more live streaming culture things. So it's pretty sophisticated film, actually.
I think I think the comedy, like you say, and the commentary works on several levels. And I was quite pleased when I saw the fairly strong IMDb score and the critic score, because that means obviously that people watched it and didn't dismiss it and got what he was doing. And I was really pleased to see that, because oftentimes, like we've talked about, where fans will get it, but like a critic doesn't get it or whatever. And I was also pleased that the critic score was higher than the audience score, because obviously there's some audience members who don't get it, who watched it and were disappointed by what they saw. Whereas for me, it was like, I totally got what he was doing, and it was really enjoyable.
And I enjoyed it more the second time, because the first time I was more kind of just grappling with what the tone of the film was. It's a little bit different. And then but once you get what he's going for and you watch it again, like I'm going in with kind of like, this is sort of like an Evil Dead, then I thought it was pretty funny.
Yeah, because the first time I know that I had said, oh, you got to watch this, and you weren't really on board the first time.
Yeah.
But I was glad that you chose to do it, even though I wasn't glad to watch Dashcam a second time, because I do think it's a really great comparison of not only these two live streaming, sort of found footage films, but also how you can approach social commentary, and for us as fans and viewers, what was successful and what wasn't. And again, I think it comes back to that Savage might have had some really good things to say, but how he chooses to format his views didn't work for me, didn't work for you.
No.
Whereas this one maybe even has some similar things to say, but how he chose to format his views allows us to engage with the content much, much more easily.
Yeah, and I think Dashcam is so grating and hard to watch, probably turns off audiences, whereas this guy, like, this is a very accessible horror film. Like, you could get any group of people together. Even if you're not a horror fan, I'd probably enjoy it.
Yeah.
And I think, I mean, maybe it's a bit of a criticism. I think this has far more of a comedy mode than a horror mode.
For sure.
I never felt really scared.
No,
it's just so funny that, yeah, you're never really that invested in the horror part of it. It's more of a comedy.
Yeah.
But some of the comedy is so good. Like, he stabs Chrissy through the neck with the the stake. She's lying on the ground bleeding out. He's like, "Oh, I'll leave this first aid kit here for you." His scream is hilarious. He has this like high pitched, like kind of girly scream, which is so good.
Yeah.
And he's like, the whole movie, he's trying not to swear. And the way they play with that, I think was really funny. Like, he like swears to one of the demons. He's like, "Die, mother Frogger," or something. Like, he's just always, he's just a really unique but clever kind of character with lots of great dialogue. And just, I think you can watch this multiple times and kind of pick up on those little one-liners.
I could see this becoming a cult classic.
Totally.
Because not only the elements that you mentioned, but it works on a meta level as well. There's a bunch of meta stuff going on where it knows what it's doing. And if you're an informed viewer, you know what it's doing as well. And I mean, I think I hadn't made the connection. I think it's so good. And I'm 100% agreeing with you, the Evil Dead connection, because I can see that now there's a scene where he cuts his finger off.
Yes.
Like, there's just a bunch of things where it's like, of course.
Being waterboarded with urine. Like, there's just so many crazy things. But yeah, it's that over the top, kind of grotesque, but funny and kind of gross. Like when that one guy's monster's like falling on top of him after he shot him with his potato gun with this little like bobblehead dude. And I thought it was very clever how he connected Mildred wanting an audience for her poetry, just like the live streamers want an audience for them. Like, so clever. So this may have actually made my top 10 list of 2022 after I watched it the second time. Yeah. So that was a good choice for your list.
Yeah. And to like, there was nothing other than the whole found footage element, which, you know, like I said, I'm not a huge fan, but I wasn't taken out of the experience by the fact that it was found footage for me. Mm-hmm. That would be my only critique, if I'm going to even call it that, is the genre that it's in. But because it's done so well, and because there's a nod and a wink to the audience, it's not, I never thought about it as a found footage film, even though that's what it is. It wasn't like Blair Witch, and I'm a huge Blair Witch fan.
Yeah, me too.
But I also have a lot of leeway for that one because it was groundbreaking in so many ways. And it's like, okay, well, if you're a trailblazer, I'll give you some leeway to do things maybe that, but if you're 20 years or 25 years on, you better be doing something different with that genre.
And this did feel very refreshing, I think.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So even though I apologize you had to watch Dashcam twice, I think these are very interesting films to contrast with each other as both 2022 films who are trying this live stream thing where I think one succeeds and one fails miserably. Yeah. But kind of interesting to compare the two.
Yeah, I think it's a great choice. And it does work as a comparison for lots of reasons.
And for me, like, because I really did not enjoy the live stream chat in Dashcam, but I felt like the use of the live stream chat was brilliant in this case. Yeah. Like, I just was laughing so hard at all those videos of little kid telling him what to do. And yeah.
And so interesting that the exact same element, successful in one case and completely unsuccessful in the other. Mm-hmm. And I think you've already hit it a couple of times because the commentary in the live stream just added to that negativity of the main character. Whereas I think the live stream comments in this one were quite different, and they added an element rather than just added to the vitriol of the main character, which happened in Dashcam.
And I do want to be clear, because this is the first episode we kind of like touched on political content, but my issue is not whether it's a right wing or left wing. It's that type of person, that culture warrior, that person who isn't engaging with ideas thoughtfully or in a nuanced way. Just their whole sole purpose is to just crap on the other side politically. So whether it's left wing or right wing. So if you're a right leaning person listening to this podcast, like, please don't take away from this that that's our issue. My issue is with that type of personality, whether it's left or right wing.
Well, and again, politics aside, it's the filmmaking that doesn't work.
100%.
It wasn't the character or the politics of the character. It was the fact that the film, for me, didn't work, didn't have a focus, didn't know what it wanted to do, and had so many weak elements that I couldn't really engage with whatever he was trying to do.
Yeah. It's just so interesting just to go with that type of character. It's just going to be so polarizing for your audience, I think. But it's not even flattering. Like if you identified with those viewpoints about the pandemic or whatnot, like it doesn't even paint those in a good light. I just feel like she does no good for anybody, really.
Yeah. It'll be, I mean, I'm just thinking that it'll be interesting to see how these two films age, because I can see Deadstream aging well.
I think you're right. Cult classic.
Yeah. Like because of the comedy, but also because, as I said, there's a knowing wink to the audience. Whereas I would argue that Savage's film almost comes across as dogmatic because there's so much dogma in it that it's hard to engage with the film on that level.
Like maybe it would age as kind of a time capsule.
Maybe.
Like, here's what during this pandemic era, like these types of people. I think in the interviews, like we do see these people in society, so why not have them in a film?
Yeah,
and I guess fair enough.
Yeah.
Like for sure, I think we get a very left-leaning perspective in film overall. And was it The Hunt?
Yes.
From a couple, and I feel like that was poking fun at liberals.
Absolutely.
It wasn't a bunch of like Trump supporters. And they let them go and they're like hunting them down and killing them. Like that.
I love that film though. I thought that was great.
Same. Like that was clever, right? Like you took a more right-wing perspective, I think, but you did it in a way that was thoughtful and fun. And as a more left-leaning person, or at least a kind of centrist person, did make me question some of my ideas. Whereas this is just so extreme. And so I think we use the term vitriolic a lot, but I didn't think there was any thoughtful political or social commentary here.
Yeah.
Anyways. All right. Well, do you have any other thoughts for either Deadstream or Dashcam before we wrap up?
I do not.
And I think we're both obviously recommending Deadstream.
I think it's a really fun watch. And you've already mentioned, even if you're not a horror fan, it's so light on the horror stuff and heavier on the comedy that I think a lot of people, mainstream audiences, could enjoy.
And this is kind of your perfect Friday popcorn movie.
Absolutely.
Like I think if you watch this with a group of friends, it would be more fun.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think definitely check out Deadstream and avoid Dashcam.
Indeed.
All right. So do you want to tell us what we're looking at for next episode?
So next episode, we are going to be looking at a classic film. Is it 1971 or 74?
It was early 70s, 74 maybe?
Maybe 74. Daughters of Darkness, but a nod to Mike Munster's evolution of horror, because it turned me on to this film and there were so many positive things said about it that I thought that we needed to have a look at it. So that's what we're doing next episode.
All right. Well, thanks very much for listening, and we'll see you in the aisles. Thanks so much for listening to Dudes of the Dead podcast, where Maniac Mike and Leatherface Lee break down their latest horror movie recommendations.
The show is researched, written, and hosted by Mike Vincent and Lee Neese. Produced and edited by Lee Neese. Special thanks to Aaron Jabs for the outro music. This has been a Neesely Done podcast production.